This lecture gives a brief overview of sequential move games. To understand sequential move games, let's first define a Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium is a set of strategies, one for each player, in which each strategy is a best response against the other. When players act rationally, optimally, and in their own self-interest, it's possible to compute the likely outcomes or equilibria of a game. And by studying games, we learn not only where certain strategies are likely to take us, but also how to modify the rules of the game to our own advantage. In a sequential move game, players take turns moving, and the outcome is influenced by who moves first, so there's a potential first mover advantage or disadvantage, and who can commit to a particular course of action. So in game theory, there are several types of games. The first, which we're talking about here, is sequential move games. A contrast would be simultaneous move games. But in a sequential move game, each player is given the opportunity to evaluate their rival's move before they proceed or decide how to proceed. To analyze sequential move games, we will use an extensive form or tree form of the game and apply the basic principle of look ahead and reason back. For example, a two-move, two-person game is one in which player one moves first, and in doing so they have to anticipate player two's response to each of player one's possible moves. That anticipation itself determines player one's optimal move, and the equilibrium is the outcome where each player chooses their best available move, anticipating how the other will respond rationally, optimally, and self-interestedly to what they observe. Suppose that a potential entrant firm is deciding whether or not to enter an industry in which they would face the competition of an incumbent monopolist firm. If the entrant decides to enter the industry, the incumbent firm has two options. They can accommodate the entry, meaning they essentially make room for the second firm and give up some of their market to the second firm, or they can fight the new entrant, possibly in the form of a very competitive price war, trying to drive the competitor out of the industry. Now, by modeling this situation using game theory, we can see that accommodating an entrant actually leads to potential profits, while fighting the entrant leads to economic losses. Let's model this as an extensive tree form of the game. So we see here that the entrant is the first mover. The first mover is actually choosing between entering the industry, which is the left-hand path, or staying out. And some payoffs here in millions of dollars are given for the entrant, which is the first mover, so the payoff is listed first. And then the monopolist, the second firm, who moves second in response to what they observe the entrant doing, their payoffs are given in the second, They're here in blue. So the second mover payoffs are typically listed second. So if the entrant stays out of the market, things continue, business continues as usual, the status quo. The new entrant neither loses nor earns money, so their profit is zero, and we see that the incumbent firm earns a profit of $10 million. Now, if the new firm enters the market corresponding to the in strategy, then the monopolist either accommodates or fights. We see that accommodation, in this case, results in a very simple 50-50 split, profits of $5 million to each firm. The second choice, fighting, leads to negative profits, so a costly price war will lead to economic losses for both firms of negative $5 million. Let's look ahead and reason back. If the monopolist decides that they want to act rationally, optimally, and self-interestedly, then it's clear that accommodating is the better choice than fighting. And the way that we will model this is by making a double cross or crossing out the fight strategy. Looking ahead and reasoning back, the new entrant anticipates that if they enter in, the monopolist will find it optimal to accommodate, and so the new entrant is really faced with a choice between entering and being accommodated and staying out of the market. Entering and being accommodated earns a positive profit of $5 million for the new firm. staying out earns a profit of 0, and so staying out is the suboptimal choice, which we also rule out by making double crosses through that strategy. So in this game, the equilibrium would be in, comma, accommodate. In is the strategy for the first firm, accommodate for the second firm. We can find that given the strategy of each firm, neither firm has an incentive to deviate if they're acting rationally, optimally, and self-interestedly. Now, you may be thinking, okay, I get that, but that doesn't strike me as very plausible. For one, it's sort of implying that this powerful monopoly firm, think AT&T or think Standard Oil, they're just being forced to sort of sit on their laurels and accept any new company that comes in and give over their market power. That seems totally at odds with what we know about monopoly firms, and in fact, it is. But the fact that that's the outcome really is simply reflecting the fact that it is not in the incumbent firm's best interests, at least in the short term, to fight a price war. However, if the incumbent firm could deter entry or could find a way to deter entry, they would maintain their total market share and earn the profit of $10 million. Now, what are some things that they could do? The incumbent could fight the entry by setting a low price, in which case they would actually earn an economic loss, or they could make a commitment, a credible commitment to fight the new entrant. And if that commitment is credible or believable, and sufficiently believable that it scares the new firm out of the market, prevents them from ever entering the market, then the incumbent firm could benefit. To model this type of commitment device, the new firm has to believe that the incumbent firm is going to engage in a price war. Now, how could they do that? How could they credibly convey that? Well, they could say, look, any new entrant who comes in, we're going to engage in a price war. Talk is cheap. That may or may not be credible. They could take out a full-page ad in every major newspaper in the country and commit in writing to engaging in a price war should a new firm enter in. Well, that becomes a little more credible because it's in writing and it might even be enforceable in a court of law. Now, all of a sudden, the monopoly firm has essentially committed to a certain course of action. In fact, if we wanted to go back to the extensive form of this game, we could eliminate the lower left node. By placing the ad in every major newspaper, the monopoly firm has essentially taken off the table the possibility of accommodating. Now, the new entrant knows that if they enter, the only option remaining to the incumbent monopoly firm is to engage in a price war. And if that's the case, then the new entrant is really faced with a choice between entering and facing a costly price war and losing money, or staying out of the market and earning a profit of 0. In that case, looking ahead and reasoning back leads to an equilibrium of stay out, comma, fight. Now, this is an interesting point for a couple of reasons. It gives us a little bit more realistic view of what we know of monopoly firms. But more importantly, it illustrates an important principle in game theory and in economics, and that is that by eliminating some of your options, you can actually make yourself better off. This is a little bit counterintuitive. Many of us are used to thinking of this idea that if I have more options, it can only make me better off because I can always make one of my original choices, but new options also give me other choices, which I'll only choose if they're at least as good, if not better. In game theory, that logic does not always hold. In game theory, and in many situations, it is actually the case that by eliminating some of our options, we make ourselves better off, as is the case with the monopoly firm that takes off the table the ability to accommodate, pre-commits to a costly price war, and in so doing prevents the very entry of the new firm that would lead to the price war, maintains their market share, and maintains their profit of $10 million. Thanks for listening.